Chapter 6293. Ying, this skeleton army is already Beichen's subordinates. You weren't afraid when you first saw the skeletons. What's there to be worried about now? Ziran did not seem to care. However, he still hugged Shangguan Ying with his arm to give her a sense of security. I'm not afraid of the skeletons now. I'm just afraid that something strange will appear. Shangguan Ying touched her arm. Anyway, this environment is really strange. Do you think this is the place that the map pointed us to? Or do we just happen to come across this crafty city on our way here? Everyone looked at each other. There was a trace of doubt in their eyes. I don't know. However, since we've already come across it, let's see what's strange about this place, Di Beichen said in a deep voice. Mo Yunjua's eyes also showed a trace of interest. This place is so hard to find. That old man spent so much time and still couldn't find this place. Since we've come across it, it's also a kind of luck. Although we can't be sure what's strange about this place, it's not bad for us to learn more about it. They were people who planned to go to the Immortal region. The upper realm was a plane that was one level lower than the Immortal region. If they did not even dare to explore this place, why would they go to the chaotic Immortal region? Bailey Hongzhuang also nodded. Although the change in the weather is very difficult to deal with, it's also an interesting experience. Let's see what's going to happen next. As if she was affected by everyone's emotions, Shangguan Ying also waved away the trace of worry in her heart. A smile appeared on her face again. It's indeed interesting when you think about it. All of you are famous people in the upper realm. Now you have to hide in this tree to avoid the rain. If other people knew about this, I'm afraid they wouldn't dare to believe it. As soon as she said this, everyone chuckled. It was obviously such a bad environment. However, because everyone was gathered here, they felt that it was very interesting. The rain was just as everyone expected. It would not stop for a while. The rain almost turned into a river. Fortunately, the tree that everyone was hiding in was very tall. Even if there was a river below, it would not affect them much. It was not until the afternoon of the second day that the rain stopped. The sky looked as if it had been washed, and it was a clear blue. Looking at the blue sky, everyone felt happy. The rain has finally stopped. I'm glad that I learned how to swim. Otherwise, I wouldn't know where to run to if the water overflowed. When Ziran shook his head and sighed. After the rain stopped, he felt relieved. The ground is covered with water. It won't disappear in a short time. Bailey Yunyan looked down at the water below. For more than a day, the water level had been rising. Previously, it was only knee-deep, but now it was already half a person's height. It's fine. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. A ship immediately appeared in everyone's line of sight. In the past, when they were training in the ocean world, this ship had always been with them and she had always kept it well. He hadn't used it for quite some time now, but he didn't expect it to come in handy again. Chapter 6294. The water level will gradually decrease, but before that, let's row the boat and move forward. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly, her figure leaping onto the boat. Di Beichen and the rest did not waste any time and sat on the boat. The boat moved forward smoothly, and its speed was not slow at all compared to when they were traveling. However, everything was just as Bailey Hongzhuang had predicted. The river receded very quickly, and it only took half a day for the water to disappear. Everyone began to move forward on foot again. When they saw that the ground in front of them was still flat, they were no longer confused. In such a harsh living environment, it was not easy for a few trees to survive. As they got closer to the front, they became more certain that this was the place where the old man came from. This was because the closer they got, the more they felt that the effect of their primary energy was gradually disappearing. This feeling undoubtedly made everyone panic. Ever since they embarked on the path of cultivation, the effect of their primary energy had always been reflected in their daily lives, and everyone was already used to the various magical effects of their primary energy. However, the effect of their primary energy was disappearing. They could not use their primary energy to speed up their journey, nor could they use their primary energy to protect their bodies from harm. It felt as if the more they moved forward, the more their cultivation level regressed. Step by step, they became their original selves who had never started cultivating. This feeling was very strange. Perhaps they did not notice it at the beginning, but the feeling became more obvious as they moved forward. Unknowingly, the scene of their cultivation appeared in everyone's minds. What were they doing when their cultivation levels were like this? This place is so strange. Bailey Hongzhuang broke free from her memories, and her expression turned grave. Could it be that this place we're in is an illusion? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned and looked around vigilantly. The feeling of being inexplicably immersed in her memories was very strange. If it was on a normal day they would not be in such a state at all. Upon hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's voice, when Xiren and the rest came back to their senses. After realizing the situation from before, everyone was bewildered. If this is an illusion, then this person's means are probably more powerful than Qing devils. Di Beichen's face was full of solemnity. The environment set up by the Qing devil was very real. It was only because of some utilitarian points that they were able to crack it. However, based on what they had sensed so far, they had yet to discover the purpose of the illusory realm. If this is really an illusion, then it's too scary. Di Xiaofeng's expression became very unsightly. Normally, the size of the illusion indicates the strength of the person who created it. The more realistic the illusion, the larger the range, the more powerful the opponent would be. Along the way, the range has completely exceeded the ordinary illusion, which means that this person's strength has exceeded our imagination. Everyone's heart sank. This place was indeed strange. That doesn't make sense. Mo Yunjue suddenly said, if this is an illusion, then its purpose is to trap people here forever. Then how did that old man leave? Chapter 6295. This is such a remote place. Normally no one would come here. Most people wouldn't think of waiting here, right? Ling Er looked around. Although many experts like to live a carefree life, even experts wouldn't like the environment here. If it's not the environment, then it means that the environment here is really like this. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. After feeling less worried, she felt that this place was mysterious and strange. So there really is such a special place in this world. Seeing it once is really better than hearing about it 100 times. Everyone felt relieved. Although the environment in front of them was very bad, it was a very interesting experience to be able to explore such a magical place. If it weren't for this map, we would never have known that there was such a mysterious place in the upper realm. Shengguan Yingying smiled. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly and said in high spirits, I suddenly look forward to this inheritance even more. I wonder what kind of inheritance it is that it would be left in such an interesting place. Noticing that everyone's interest was piqued, Di Beichen's expression also relaxed. According to the location marked on the map, we should be able to reach it in a few days. That's great. Bai Lianche was happy. The weather here can change at any time. If we have to stay here for a long time, it will be really bad. Although they had passed through all kinds of situations very calmly so far, no one knew what would happen in the end as the origin energy became weaker and weaker. If they lost all their origin energy in the end, just the bad weather alone would be enough to kill them. Hearing this, everyone's heart sank. This was indeed a mysterious and strange place, but the risks involved were not small. Other than that, everyone had another worry in their hearts. They didn't know if the disappearance of the origin energy was temporary or if it had truly disappeared. The various situations before them made it impossible for them to make an accurate judgment. The only thing they could do was to continue moving forward. A cloudy day was undoubtedly the best weather for everyone. In such an environment, the speed of everyone's advance was also much faster than before. However, the good times did not last long. It had only been 4 hours, and everyone found that the weather had begun to change again. It's suddenly chilly again. Is it going to get cold again? Shengguan Yingying looked at the vast land in front of her and frowned. The sudden change in temperature was extremely uncomfortable. A cold wind blew past. It was bone-chilling. From the time when everyone noticed the change in the weather to the time when the temperature dropped, it had only been the time for an incense stick to burn. In the blink of an eye, it was already winter. What terrible weather. Everyone took out thicker clothes from their chinkuan bags. However, due to their cultivation, they didn't need to wear thick clothes even in winter. At this moment, they had no choice. This is only temporary. If we persist, it won't be long before the sky changes. A clear and sweet voice sounded, and Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were firm as she looked at everyone. Even though they had only been here for a few days, they had already completely adapted to the weather. Chapter 6296. However, the situation was far worse than what everyone had imagined. Bang bang bang. It's hailstones. Quickly find a place to hide. Suddenly, countless hailstones fell from the sky. Once the fist-sized hailstones fell on their bodies, the pain was still extremely intense. If they were not careful and were hit by more than one hailstone, even they could be seriously injured. Quick, go to the front. Di Beichen pointed at a hill in front of them and shouted. Everyone sped up, dodging the hailstones as they rushed forward at full speed. There were no caves or places to hide in the surroundings. This was something that everyone had already noticed when they were moving forward. So at this moment, when everyone arrived at a hill, they did not hesitate to pick up a shovel and start digging a cave. In this situation, other than this method, they could not find any other way. Even if it would take some time, as long as they could endure it, everything would be fine. While Di Beichen and the others were digging a cave, Di Xiaofeng and Bailey Yunyan raised the boat above everyone's head. Clang clang clang. The hailstones fell on the boat and made a violent sound. Di Beichen and the others' hands were moving quickly. If they were not careful and were hit by the hailstones, bruises would immediately appear on their bodies. Not long after, everyone finally dug out a cave that could accommodate them and hid in it. My God, something like hailstones can even happen. This damn weather is simply deliberately messing with us. Xiao Xuanzi rubbed his shoulder. Even if he tried his best to dodge, the hailstones still inevitably hit his body. Fortunately, he was originally a demonic beast and his body was relatively strong. Even if his spirit energy had degenerated, his physical strength was still there. Other than a slight pain, there were no major problems. As for Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, their situation was slightly worse. Although they usually paid attention to tempering their bodies, there were still some differences between them and demonic beasts. The feeling of this hailstone hitting my body is like being kicked out by someone. When Xiren rubbed his arm. Do you think that if we continue to move forward, the sky will not fall from the sky? Puchi. Shengguan Yingying, who was originally annoyed, suddenly laughed. Hailstones should be the most exaggerated. How could there be knives? The effect of this hail is not much worse than a knife. I'm afraid we'll be tortured to death by this weather before we even reach our destination. Xiren shook his head. Normally, he only felt that his strength was enough to deal with many crises. He did not pay much attention to the power of heaven and earth. However, after this encounter, he finally understood how terrifying the power of nature was. We do have to be careful from now on. Di Beichen's expression turned grave. Our elemental energy has regressed a lot and it's still regressing. This means that before we reach our destination, we may become ordinary people who have never cultivated before. When that time comes, whether it is our speed or our physical condition, it will be far from what it is now. If we encounter another hailstorm. Di Beichen's voice stopped, but everyone understood that they could not underestimate this weather. Otherwise they might really lose their lives here. Could it be that this strange place wants to use such a special method to let us experience what despair is? Chapter 6297. It's useless for us to think so much now. Since we're already here, we can only continue forward. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes were filled with determination as always. She believed that they would definitely be able to pass through this place. The greater the difficulty they encountered now, the greater the rewards they would reap in the future. Since the inheritance could appear in this place, it could be seen that the person who left the inheritance had also passed through this place. One could only imagine how powerful this person was. The hail fell for an entire night, and everyone stayed in the cave for an entire night. This night was exceptionally difficult to endure because the coldness had already seeped into their bones and blood. If not for their perseverance, once they fell asleep in this cold night, they might never wake up again. The next day was another sunny day. Compared to the hailstorms and torrential rain, this sunny day was already the best weather for everyone. As everyone continued forward, their primary energy gradually dissipated, and everyone's appearance gradually began to change. Originally, everyone was wholeheartedly rushing forward, and only a sunny day was the most suitable time to rush. If they did not hurry now, once they encountered bad weather, they did not know how long they would have to wait. Suddenly, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that her clothes seemed to have become a little bigger. Why did the sleeves of her clothes suddenly become longer? Just as she was thinking, she suddenly noticed Di Beichen's face beside her, and her heart was suddenly filled with surprise. Beichen, you seem to have changed a little? Hearing this, Di Beichen slowed down his steps and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with some confusion. He was also a little surprised. Wife, your face. My face? Bailey Hongzhuang subconsciously touched her face with her hand, not understanding what this meant. At the same time, Shengguan Yingying and the rest also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Everyone was curious. Hongzhuang, you seem to have suddenly become a little smaller. In fact, Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance had not changed much over the years. The only difference was that she was less tender and more mature. However, the Bailey Hongzhuang in front of them reminded them of the time in Tiangang sect. At that time, Bailey Hongzhuang also looked like this. Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. Beichen is the same. Usually they were together day and night, so she didn't feel much about Beichen's change. However, just now, she suddenly noticed that Beichen's face was a little more tender, and only then did she notice the difference. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone turned to look at Di Beichen. Their expressions became very interesting. Yeah, Beichen has changed too. Xiren, you've changed too. After taking a closer look, they realized that not only had Beichen and Hongzhuang changed, but everyone present had shrunk as well. I was wondering why I felt that the clothes had become bigger. It turns out that the people have become smaller. Bailey Hongzhuang was surprised and also felt a little funny. Looking at Beichen like this, it reminded her of the time when they first met. So many years had passed unknowingly. Where is this place? It's fine if the cultivation has weakened, but even the people have become smaller. Shangguan Yingying's face was full of disbelief. This experience was really too shocking. She couldn't imagine what kind of means could make people change like this. This was beyond the scope of their understanding. Chapter 6298. Bailey Hongzhuang sensed it carefully and a look of surprise appeared on her face. That does seem to be the case. Everyone carefully recalled their current cultivation level. It was indeed the same as their age. Their initial worries lessened and were replaced by a sense of novelty. This is too strange. How did it become like this? Ling'er was confused. As a member of the Dragon Clan, she had come into contact with many novel things. However, this situation was clearly far beyond her knowledge. Everyone looked at each other. This kind of thing had never happened before. They had never even heard of it. Let's continue forward. Perhaps we'll become like when we were young. The corners of Di Beichen's lips curled into a faint smile. This kind of scene was indeed a very special experience. If it wasn't an illusion, then this kind of power was too shocking. Hearing this, everyone nodded and resolutely continued forward. Since they had already come here, there was no way they would back out. Moreover, it was very interesting to find out the reason for all this. Everything was as everyone had expected. As they got closer to their destination, their appearances became smaller and smaller. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the little boy in front of her. Her eyes were filled with joy. She had never seen Di Beichen's appearance as a child. This guy had indeed been good-looking since he was a child. Hongzhuang, I didn't expect you to have changed so much. Shangguan Yingying walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Her eyes were filled with curiosity. I think it's quite interesting now. It's as if we've known each other since we were young. I've changed a lot. Bailey Hongzhuang raised an eyebrow and asked. Shangguan Yingying nodded and casually took out a mirror. Look, isn't this quite a big change? Bailey Hongzhuang originally didn't take Shangguan Yingying's words to heart. However, when she saw the familiar yet unfamiliar face in the mirror, her expression suddenly changed. Hongzhuang, what's wrong? Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but ask when she saw Bailey Hongzhuang's shocked expression in the mirror. Logically speaking, they should have guessed the situation before them and shouldn't be so shocked. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was in a perilous situation. Not for any other reason but because the face reflected in the mirror was not her previous appearance. It was her appearance in her previous life. This face had only appeared in her memories. However, it had truly appeared now. This incident had shocked her more than anything before. Aside from Beichen, no one else knew about this. However, in this mysterious place she had actually become her real self. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang only felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of terrible power was this? So many incredible things could happen. Hongzhuang? Are you all right? After a long while, Bailey Hongzhuang recovered from her thoughts. Her face was filled with shock and disbelief. She shook her head and said, I'm fine. Didn't you just see your childhood appearance? Why are you so shocked? Shangguan Yingying heaved a sigh of relief. You scared me to death. I thought something had happened. Chapter 6299. Mo Yunjue looked deeply at Bailey Hongzhuang. A faint light flashed in his deep and enchanting eyes. Even though the young face in front of him was still very beautiful, the difference was too big. A person who saw their own appearance when they were young would definitely not reveal such a shocked expression, and Hongzhuang's expression just now was clearly very strange. After sweeping away the doubts of Shangguan Yingying and the others, everyone then continued on their way. They were a little curious as to what they would become in the end. At this time, Di Beichen walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. His concerned voice sounded in her ear. Wife, is this how you looked in your previous life? Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. She did not expect Di Beichen to have guessed it so quickly. She nodded, not hiding anything. Between her and Di Beichen, there had never been any secrets. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang nod, Di Beichen's expression became very complicated. What kind of power was this, to be able to change the appearance of the deepest part of the soul? Then those people who had taken over her body would have nowhere to hide. Face her true self in her heart? This matter is really getting more and more interesting. The corners of Di Baichen's lips raised slightly, the memories of his childhood kept appearing in his mind. When he was young he followed his master to gain experience and played around with Xiren. Those memories that were gradually fading gradually became clear at this moment. Everyone's mood unconsciously became happy. When he was young he was the most carefree, he did not know what worry was, he only cared about whether he was happy or not. Even Bailey Hongzhuang did not have the pain and ridicule of childhood in this life. In her previous life she grew up in the palms of her clansmen. Every elder treated her as the apple of their eye. Even if she did something wrong, when they reprimanded her, they would not be so cruel as to scold her. Her childhood memories were recovering. Ever since she had transmigrated, she would occasionally remember everything from her previous life. That was a memory she did not dare to touch because every time she thought of it, she would feel a little sad. If possible, she really wanted to see her grandfather again, she really wanted to see those old men who she had taken the opportunity to pull their beards. Their smiles were always so warm in her memory, but she did not fulfill the expectations of the elders for her, and died early, even implicating the Bailey family. She knew very well that no one would blame her. How could these old men who loved her to the bone blame her? However, she had no way not to blame herself. Back then, that little girl was also mischievous every day when she studied. She recalled this scene in her mind, unknowingly, tears had already blurred her vision. Shengguan Yu of the general's residence, they all knew that when she was young she was always bullied when she was young. Of the general, of the time, of the Bailey Hongzhuang, of the Beichen. Other than Bailey Hongzhuang, Mo Yunjue was still expressionless. Even when he was young he was still so cold, his lonely figure could not help but make people's hearts ache. The only difference was that his eyes were filled with hatred and killing intent. Looking at Mo Yunjue like this, everyone felt their hearts ache. They had always been curious as to why Mo Yunjue had such a cold temperament. Other than Hongzhuang's every frown and smile, everything else seemed to have nothing to do with him. Chapter 6300. It turned out that Mo Yunjue had become like this at such a young age. Even if they didn't know what had happened to him, they knew that it was definitely not a happy childhood just by thinking about it. His cold-bloodedness and indifference started when he was young. No wonder it was ingrained into his bones and couldn't be changed. As everyone's appearance became smaller and smaller, they finally stopped at the appearance of 6 or 7 years old and never changed again. Everyone finally relaxed when they saw this. Otherwise, if he were to become an infant, then how would they be able to find the inheritance? Not only that, but the weather also stopped changing, allowing everyone to let out a sigh of relief. Looks like the situation isn't as bad as we thought. At least we won't lose our lives for now. Di Baichen's gaze fell in front of him. He could already see the blue sea as far as his eyes could see. They were getting closer and closer to their destination. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the map in her hand and compared it to the environment in front of them. The location marked on the map is here. Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up. We've finally reached our destination. But according to the location marked on the map, the inheritance is in the ocean. But right now we don't have any cultivation and we're still children. It's very dangerous for us to enter the ocean. Di Xiaofeng looked at the boundless ocean in front of him and his heart sank. With their current situation, no matter how you looked at it, it would be very difficult for them to enter the inheritance. Let's take it one step at a time. Mo Yunjue's voice sounded. Since the inheritance was set up, there must be a way to obtain it. Everyone nodded. What he said was true. Since the inheritance was left behind, there was no way that they wouldn't have a chance to obtain it. Perhaps the cultivator who drew this map in the past couldn't pass this stage but was unwilling to give up, so he thought of a way to draw this map. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the map in her hand and didn't feel optimistic about the situation in front of her. To be able to draw such a map and leave here, this person's strength was definitely not simple. Even so, this person hadn't succeeded. With their current situation, they didn't have any advantage. As they got closer and closer to the ocean, their vision became wider and wider. Looking at the sea in front of them, everyone was at a loss. With such small arms and legs, it would be a problem for them to row the boat. Just as everyone was pondering, a deep and powerful voice suddenly sounded in everyone's ears. Are you tired? Along the way you've gradually grown up. You've experienced sadness and exhaustion. Do you feel that it's been hard? You were so simple and pure when you were a child. Before all the damage was done, you were just your original self, the most simple and happiest person. This voice was like the sound of an immortal. It came from far away, but it also seemed to resound in everyone's hearts. After hearing these words, the voices and smiles of the dead unconsciously appeared in everyone's minds. It's been hard on you. You've been injured so many times. There's always someone trying to hurt you. Even if it's someone you're trying your best to protect, he might not understand you at all. Everything you've worked so hard for might not be recognized by others. You've wandered the world until now and you've obtained everything you've ever wanted. But are you really happy? Chapter 63:01. The pain in their hearts was constantly magnified. All the pain they had suffered over the years appeared in their minds, constantly sensing their emotions. Every crisis, the slightest carelessness could cost them their lives. Nervousness, panic, and fear were constantly magnified. Everything they had tried so hard to keep could be lost at any time. You will never know if the people you care about will lose their lives in one of the trials. Those people you once knew and hated were once high-spirited, but in the end they still turned into eerie bones. Actually, as long as they don't go to the trials, they can live well. Is the Tao so important? Why do we have to walk the path that others have walked? You cannot be so tired. As long as you let go of all this, let go of this so-called absurd obsession, you will become relaxed. Let go of your obsession, let go of the worldly troubles of chasing, then you will be your true self. This voice was ancient and mysterious, sounding like Sanskrit in everyone's hearts. Every sentence carried a settled power hitting everyone's hearts. An inexplicable feeling of oppression exploded in everyone's hearts, bringing with it an indescribable sadness. All the hard work was actually just your obsession, meaningless. If you were just an ordinary person, then you wouldn't have to work so hard to live an ordinary life. Humans were born to be lonely. Return to the origin and find your original happiness. Everyone was immersed in their own thoughts, and their pessimistic feelings were constantly magnified. Yes, why did they have to work so hard? Actually, they could live a simple and happy life. Come to me. Let go of all your obsession, then you can be truly happy. It was as if there was a pair of warm hands waving at them. As long as they walked forward, they could have true happiness. Come, child, the sea of bitterness is boundless. Turn back and be saved. Everyone unconsciously took a step forward, slowly walking forward. They had been really tired and hard all these years. Now, as long as they walked forward, they could stop the source of all their pain. Everyone looked forward in a daze, thinking about the definition of life. It was as if what they once firmly believed in was now meaningless. There was no power that could support them to continue. The thought of giving up quickly circled in their minds. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were empty and confused. Listening to this ancient and persuasive voice, she vaguely saw a kind of emotion struggling in her heart, as if she felt that there was something wrong with what he said. However, under the influence of pessimism, it was difficult for such emotions to emerge. Bailey Hongzhuang swayed left and right. Her footsteps paused slightly, as if she was trying to figure out what the conflicting emotions were. And the instant she came to a stop, the rising belief in her heart finally became clear. No. All these years of hard work were not in vain. Because she never gave up, because she worked hard, she found her family and gave them a better life. Perhaps if they stopped, they would be able to live a peaceful life. However, in this society where the strong preyed on the weak, no one knew when an accident would happen. Chapter 63:02. Perhaps what they were doing now could not be seen for the time being, but if such a crisis really happened one day, they still had the ability to stabilize the situation. They had walked all the way with pride and arrogance. There was indeed pain and danger. The road ahead was full of thorns. No one knew if they would still be alive in this world in the next moment. But even if they did nothing, the risk still existed. They were not walking the path that others had walked, but the path that they wanted to walk. This kind of pessimistic mood should not belong to them. After this positive thought appeared in her mind, Bailey Hongmei's confused eyes showed a trace of light. That's right, she should not be in this mood. The so-called origin was just the initial appearance of being powerless. Because she did not have the strength, the former Bailey Hongmei was bullied like that when she was young. If she had the strength at that time, then so many things would not have happened later. So, why give up everything and return to her original appearance? The light in the darkness became brighter and brighter. When the pair of eyes became overflowing with light, Bailey Hongzhuang broke free from the enchantment of the demonic sound and regained her consciousness. After finding her true self, Bailey Hongmei realized that she was no longer in the appearance of a child. Instead, she had returned to her original appearance. A faint smile appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's delicate face. She looked at her familiar hands and her heart became even more resolute. There were many things that you had always ignored because when you faced them, you would fall into a very complicated mood. But when you truly faced all of this, your heart would become more determined. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that she had been baptized. Not only did her will not waver, it was even more firm and stable than before. Was this an illusion? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the scene in front of her and felt a little puzzled. It was like an illusion but also not an illusion. There was a kind of unfathomable feeling. This kind of power exceeded her previous understanding and became extremely special. Turning her head, Bailey Hongzhuang found that Di Beichen had also broken free from this kind of despair. Because Di Beichen had also changed from his original appearance of a child to a normal appearance. However, other than the two of them, the others were still in the state of being controlled. What the hell is going on? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyes slightly and looked at the others who were slowly walking forward with confused expressions. In front of them was the azure blue sea. With everyone's current appearance as children, once they fell into it they would definitely die. Di Beichen's handsome face was solemn and cautious. He tried to wake the others up, but found that they were all immersed in their own thoughts and could not be disturbed by external forces. Such a scene was strange yet familiar to them. Not too long ago they had also experienced such a scene. It seems that external forces are unable to awaken them. The only way is to rely on their own willpower to break free from despair. Otherwise, both of their hearts sank. They were only a few hundred meters away from the sea. Even if they were walking slowly, it wouldn't be long before they fell into it. Hongzhuang, don't worry. I believe that with everyone's perseverance, we should be able to escape. Chapter 6303. Although the situation in front of them was extremely dangerous, they had experienced all the way and gone through many tests. Their determination was far stronger than ordinary people. Even if they fell into despair and confusion at the beginning, as long as they were given a certain amount of time, they believed that they would be able to break through the shackles and understand everything. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly, and her delicate jade-like face had a trace of calmness. Recalling everything that had happened earlier, a trace of inspiration flashed through her mind. Do you remember that in the strange illusion just now the ancient voice said, "The sea of bitterness is boundless, repent and you'll be saved"? Di Beichen's eyes narrowed slightly. This is a sea. The sea of bitterness abyss. The two of them looked at each other and said this word at the same time. Previously, when they saw the location depicted on the 4 incomplete maps, they vaguely had this conjecture in their minds. The upper realm and the lower realm had 3 abysses. After asking Granny Hua and the others, they clearly understood that the Sea of Bitterness abyss was not in the celestial region. There must be a reason for the legends passed down from ancient times. The Sea of Bitterness abyss must exist, but it was gradually forgotten in the long river of history. As long as everything in front of them was connected, there was no doubt that this was most likely the Sea of Bitterness abyss. No wonder no one knew the location of the Sea of Bitterness abyss for so many years. This place is so remote and it's so dangerous to walk here. It's normal that no one knew after a long time. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the blue sea in front of her with emotion. Even if she had not seen the true appearance of the Sea of Bitterness abyss until now, based on everything she had experienced so far, the Sea of Bitterness abyss was completely different from the other 2 abysses. Among the 3 abysses, although the inheritance of the first 2 abysses is difficult to obtain, someone has succeeded in obtaining it. Only the Sea of Bitterness abyss has not been successfully passed through so far. Di Beichen's eyes, which were as deep as the sea, rippled with a complicated light. He looked around cautiously. The Sea of Bitterness abyss was really too mysterious. This mysterious power could obliterate anyone with a weak will because everyone would have some pain in their heart and things they did not want to recall. Giving up was a thought that would occasionally appear in everyone's mind. It was just that everyone usually deliberately ignored these thoughts. Nonetheless, when a mysterious power kept magnifying those thoughts, everything became terrifying. The pain that had been suppressed in the bottom of your heart was magnified infinitely. It created a beautiful and carefree environment for you. This was completely in line with human nature because everyone thought the same thing. Not only that, this kind of power was even beyond one's imagination, because some people who had experienced pain before would find it even harder to walk out of such emotions. It was a kind of shackle, a kind of obsession that made it impossible for one to let go. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look at Mo Yunjue. Of all their pasts, Mo Yunjue was undoubtedly the most painful. Even if she didn't know what kind of painful experience it was, she knew that it was something he didn't want to look back on. Among everyone's expressions, Mo Yunjue seemed to be struggling the most. This was the first time that Bailey Hongzhuang had seen Mo Yunjue reveal such a pained expression. It was as if someone had stabbed his heart viciously. The pain that seeped into his bones would cause anyone to be moved. Chapter 6304. Bai Li Yin Che, Xiao Xuanzi, Xiao He, and Xiao Bai were undoubtedly the least affected by this. They did not have any memories of the past, and ever since they recognized their master, they had been living happily. Although they had experienced all kinds of dangers, they all had good endings in the end. To them, being able to accompany their master was the happiest thing. Therefore, the so-called pain did not bring too many negative emotions to them, and happiness was not attractive to them. This was because when they opened their eyes for the first time, they saw their master. They were happiest when they were with their master, and spending the rest of their lives alone was something they were unwilling to accept. Sister, what's going on? Bai Li Yin Che could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang after he woke up. The feeling from before was too strange. This should be a test of the bitter sea abyss, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. The bitter sea abyss? Bai Li Yin Che was slightly stunned. Is this really the bitter sea abyss? Although we can't be completely sure, according to our judgment it should be close, Bailey Hongzhuang said after some thought. Xiao Bai looked around curiously. This is the bitter sea abyss? But there are no buildings here and it seems to be very different from the demonic abyss. Bai Li Yin Che and Xiao Xuanzi nodded. According to their thoughts, the bitter sea abyss should also have a huge building, but it was unexpectedly empty and there was nothing here. All along, other than knowing that the bitter sea abyss exists in the upper realm, there are almost no other records about it. Therefore, we can't get any understanding of the bitter sea abyss from other people's descriptions. Di Beichen looked calm. Since we came here by chance, it's fate. No one said that the three great abyss are similar. The bitter sea abyss has disappeared for so many years, and it shows that it's different. We do have to put aside our previous thoughts. This might be a completely different place. Bailey Hongzhuang had a serious expression. Just this method alone was something that the previous two types of chaos abyss didn't possess. Thinking about it carefully, the first two abysses targeted a cultivator's cultivation and strength, while the abyss of the sea of bitterness targeted a person's heart. The human heart was the most terrifying thing. No matter how strong a cultivator was, there was no guarantee that they could pass the test of their heart. This kind of test had almost nothing to do with strength. It was a completely different kind of test. The most important thing now is to figure out how to make everyone understand all of this. Otherwise, if this continues, once we fall into the sea, I'm afraid we'll be finished. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Mo Yunjue and the others who were still moving forward. This situation was extremely dangerous. At this moment, another person returned to his original appearance. After Shangguan Yingying woke up, she angrily rebuked, "You want to trick me into giving up? How could this be? I've worked so hard for so long, and now you want me to give up and go back to the beginning? That would be letting myself down." Chapter 6305. Yingying, you're right. Bailey Yanche smiled and gave her a thumbs up. Speaking of which, when they were in despair, they only felt that their strength was boundless. But in reality, it was just as Yingying had said. Their efforts had not been in vain. Isn't that so? Shangguan Yingying looked disgusted. At first I was almost confused, but then I thought that something was wrong. This cultivation path was chosen by me. Although the process is difficult, I don't feel pain. Otherwise, wouldn't it be too boring to stay at home and take care of her husband and children all day long? In the future they would live such a life. Now, they wanted to go out to experience the world and see the wonders of this world. The test of the bitter sea abyss is not a problem for Yingying. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. This kind of psychological test had less effect on people with simple minds. Ziren still hasn't figured it out. His will is not as strong as mine. Shangguan Yingying looked at Wen Ziren with disdain, but there was a hint of worry on her proud face. In fact, she was very clear about the difficulty of this test. As long as they lost control of their hearts, they would be finished. We're not far from the sea, Xiao Bai reminded. Everyone looked. They were only 100 meters away from the sea. If they didn't wake up, they would really fall into the sea. However, they had returned to their original state. Perhaps they could prevent this from happening. Everyone's hearts were beating fast. No one knew if they could break through the shackles of their hearts. Soon Di Xiaofeng also woke up. He was still a bit afraid. This test is quite scary. Even the test of one's mind wouldn't be like this. After noticing that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had passed, Di Xiaofeng sighed. I didn't expect your minds to be so firm. You saw through everything so quickly. Big brother, in fact, we also just woke up. Di Beichen smiled. This place is so strange. Di Xiaofeng looked around. I think this place might be the legendary bitter sea abyss. However, after saying this, Di Xiaofeng noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were calm. Am I wrong? Big brother, our thoughts are actually the same as yours. Di Beichen nodded. We also think that this might be the Bitter Sea Abyss. Hearing this, Di Xiaofeng suddenly understood. Although there are no records of the Bitter Sea Abyss in the ancient books, the scene in front of us and what we just experienced is very fitting to the name of the Bitter Sea Abyss. However, this kind of psychological barrier was often the hardest to overcome. I think the reason why no one has been able to obtain the inheritance of the Bitter Sea Abyss is because the psychological barrier is too difficult. Because no one could pass through it, and the weather here is so strange. Over time no one came here, and the news of the Bitter Sea Abyss was gradually lost. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. This kind of inner test was what everyone was most unwilling to accept. Perhaps this was also the reason why many people were in the two abyss but not the abyss of misery. Soon Bailey Yunyan also woke up. Chapter 6306. Seeing that everyone was gradually waking up, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others relaxed a little. Now, their beliefs were undoubtedly much stronger than before. Since everyone could figure it out one by one, they believed that even if Ling Er and Mo Yunjue spent a little more time, they would definitely figure it out. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen knew very well that the reason why Ling Er had fallen into such negative emotions was definitely because of the incident between Bai Yunjiao and He Shinjun. Even if there were still many things that she could not remember clearly because of the existence of the seal, just these things alone were enough to make her feel very painful. Once she was immersed in such pain, it was really too difficult to see through everything in a short period of time. The two gradually moved forward, getting closer and closer to the surface of the sea. Bai Lian-che walked directly to the front of the sea because he was worried. He wondered if they could save Ling Er and Mo Yunjue if they really fell into the sea. However, when Bai Lian-che was about 10 meters away from the sea, he found that he could not take another step forward at all. It was as if there was an invisible wall blocking his way. Noticing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' hearts sank. They knew that the situation was definitely not that simple. Once they could not break through this barrier, it meant that they could not save Mo Yunjue and He Shinjun at all. Will they be okay? Bailey Yan-che furrowed his brows, his eyes filled with worry. The abyss of the Sea of Misery was full of strangeness. Even now, they still did not understand what kind of existence it was. Logically speaking, in the past when the two great abyss tried to break through, even if they failed, they would not lose their lives. Could the situation be as bad as we think? Xiaohei could not help but ask. I can't be sure. Although they are called the three great abyss, it's obvious that the abyss of the Sea of Misery is different from the other two great abyss. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes narrowed. Perhaps the abyss of the Sea of Misery in front of them could not be judged by their previous experience. 50 meters. 30 meters. 10 meters. Everyone watched as Ling Er and Mo Yunjue got closer and closer to the surface of the sea, while they were all blocked by the restriction. Damn it, can we break this restriction? Ziren could not help but ask. Hearing this, Di Beichen pondered and said, we can give it a try, but the possibility of success is not very high. Boom. Everyone used their strongest attacks to attack the restriction. The dazzling attribute power emitted a dazzling brilliance, but the situation before them was somewhat beyond everyone's expectations. Normally, when he used his strength to attack the restriction, even if he couldn't break the restriction, he would at least cause a ripple on it. However, when their attacks landed on the restriction, it was as if they were directly absorbed. There was no movement at all. It was as if they had not attacked at all. How could this be? Shengguan Yingying was astonished. This was the first time they had seen such a restriction. Bang. When Ziren did not believe it and tried again, he found that the situation was still the same as before. What a strange restriction. Everyone's heart sank even more. If they could not break the restriction, it meant that they could only break the shackles in their hearts through themselves. However, there were only 5 meters left. If they did not wake up, it would really be over. Ling Er, wake up. Bai Lian-che shouted anxiously. 4 meters. Chapter 6307. Ling Er, Yunju, wake up. No one knew if their calls would work or if she could hear them in such a state of mind. But no matter what it was, they had to give it a try. 3 meters. Ling Er's footsteps suddenly stopped. Under everyone's gaze, she quickly returned to her original appearance. Seeing this, everyone quietly breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, everyone called out to Mo Yunjue in unison. Perhaps this method was really effective. Yunju, wake up. Don't be misled by this voice. Everything you've done is meaningful. Everyone shouted. With a distance of 3 meters, even if they moved very slowly, they would fall to the bottom of the sea in the blink of an eye. Linger looked at her surroundings in a daze. She completely did not understand why she was suddenly standing here. When she saw Mo Yunjue gradually walking into the sea, a trace of worry appeared on her face. Linger, try and see if you can hold Yunju, Di Baichen suddenly said. Hearing this, Linger immediately reached out to grab Mo Yunjue, but found that there was a layer of invisible force blocking her movements. No, there's a restriction between me and Yunju, Linger said anxiously. 3 steps. 2 steps. 1 step. There was only a distance of 1 step left. Everyone's hearts were in their mouths. A feeling of nervousness and fear spread. Along the way they had always been a team. They had never thought that one day someone might leave their team. This was something they could not accept at all. Yunju, knowing you has always been something we're happy about. The pain of the past is over. You still have us in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the tall but lonely figure, and there was a trace of heartache in her voice. She had always been grateful to Mo Yunjue. Whether it was the help in the past or the experience they had now, he had always done his best to help her. Let it go. As long as you continue moving forward, you will be able to forget all the pain. The ancient voice carried a boundless attraction as it circled around Mo Yunjue's mind. Ever since he was young he had always been in pain. Even if he was the young master of the Heaven Slaughter Pavilion, he would rather not have this identity. Even he himself found the life of a walking corpse laughable. What was the point of continuing such a life? If abandoning everything could relieve him of his pain, then he was willing to abandon everything. At this moment, a gentle, nervous and pained voice entered his ears. Mo Yunjue's body suddenly trembled. That devastatingly beautiful face appeared in his mind, like a grain of sunlight that illuminated the darkness in his heart. Scenes of the past appeared in his mind. In the past he had indeed lived a very painful life, but ever since he met Bailey Hongzhuang, many things had become less important. Even if she liked someone else he didn't care. Because liking someone was his own business. As long as he could watch from afar, it was an indescribable happiness for him. He didn't regret it. Or rather, he used to regret it, but everything changed after he met Bailey Hongzhuang. He no longer regretted it. Even if all the hardships he had encountered in the past could be exchanged for meeting her, it was worth it. Yes, it was worth it. Chapter 6308. Yunju. Everyone could not help but cry out in alarm. When they saw Yunju take a step forward, everyone's hearts were in their mouths. Once he fell into the sea, they did not dare to imagine the consequences. Bang! The sound of someone falling into the sea rang out, splashing water in all directions. For a brief moment, everyone's expression fell into a daze. They could not believe that such a thing could really happen, nor could they accept it. Yunju. Everyone cried out in alarm, their faces pale and nervous, revealing a sense of helplessness. Bang bang bang. At that moment, everyone attacked the barrier with all their might. They could not believe that the person who had been traveling with them would leave the group here. Everyone was stupefied with an indescribable panic. They were instinctively unwilling to believe the scene in front of them. Damn it! What kind of lousy place is this? When Ziran smashed his fist fiercely on the barrier. No matter how they attacked, the barrier remained unmoved without any ripples. They watched helplessly as Mo Yunjue fell into the sea, but there was nothing they could do to help. This feeling of helplessness was so sullen that it was driving them crazy. There must be a way, there must be a way. Bailey Hongzhuang forced herself to calm down. The more anxious she was, the more blank her mind became. However, at a time like this, it was too difficult to calm down. How could I die so easily? Suddenly, a cold voice with a hint of laughter rang out from the front. Hearing this voice, everyone was stunned. They were pleasantly surprised and looked in front of them in disbelief, afraid that they had made a mistake in their judgment. Was I hallucinating just now? Shengguan Yingying looked at the crowd with uncertainty. She had indeed heard this voice, but she was not sure if it was real or not. Bailey Hongzhuang also looked in front of her nervously. She and Shengguan Yingying had heard this voice as well. In the next moment, the tall black figure suddenly jumped out from the sea and appeared in front of everyone's line of sight. Seeing this scene, everyone's faces simultaneously revealed a deep sense of surprise and joy. Yunju, you're all right. You scared us to death. What the hell is going on? The moment Mo Yunjue got up, everyone discovered that the original restriction had disappeared, and they were able to smoothly rush to the front. Noticing the worry and nervousness on everyone's faces, Mo Yunju also felt a sense of warmth in his heart. He had actually been bewitched by those negative voices and had actually forgotten that he had already obtained many things that he had never obtained before. Thank you for waking me up. I woke up at the last moment. A rare smile appeared on Mo Yunjue's face, like a melting glacier, instantly illuminating everyone's hearts. At this moment, Bailey Yunyan and the others finally realized that Mo Yunjue was actually so good-looking when he smiled. This kind of clean smile was enough to stir one's heart at a glance. Not many women could resist this kind of charm. When Xiren saw that Shengguan Ying was staring at Mo Yunjue with a dazzling smile on her face, he couldn't help but stand in front of Shengguan Ying and pull Mo Yunjue to the side. Chapter 6309. After Mo Yunjue returned safely, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the situation was not as bad as they thought. As long as everyone was still together, that was the best. This place is too strange. If we're not careful, we won't know when we'll lose our lives. Should we leave this place? Shengguan Ying's face was full of worry. Recalling the previous situation, she couldn't help but feel scared. If Mo Yunjue didn't wake up at the last moment, perhaps their team would have an eternal regret. Didn't they say that no one has been able to obtain the inheritance of the Bitter Sea Abyss? It must be because this place is too strange. Everyone fell into deep thought. Everything that they had seen so far was strange. It was far more strange than they imagined. No one knew if they would run into a trap and lose their lives just like that. However, no one was willing to leave just like that. Let's look around first. The Bitter Sea Abyss has been missing for so many years. It's normal that no one has obtained the inheritance. Di Xiaofeng's face was serious. As far as he knew, the Bitter Sea Abyss had disappeared for too many years. In these years, countless cultivators had tried to break through the other two abyss. Some places that had long disappeared from everyone's sight naturally couldn't be successfully broken through. They had the opportunity to come here and it was a pity to leave just like that. That's right. Let's take a look for now. Di Beichen comforted everyone. Since we're already here, no matter what, we have to know what kind of existence the Bitter Sea Abyss is. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others nodded. It was rare for them to come here and they were unwilling to give up just like that. According to the situation on the map, the final location marked is the sea area in front. Should we go and take a look? Bailey Hongzhuang asked for everyone's opinion. Although there was only a vast sea in front of them, she believed that the mark on the map would not be wrong. At least along the way there was no problem with the mark on the map. It was just that this map didn't introduce the situation of the Bitter Sea Abyss. However, she was grateful to the owner of the map. If they hadn't noticed the small words on the map, they might have arrived here long ago. With their cultivation at that time facing such a situation, only death awaited them. Sitting on the small boat, everyone slowly rushed towards the location marked on the map. Along the way, everyone's speed was not fast. They looked around vigilantly, afraid that something would happen. Fortunately, the journey was calm and peaceful. There wasn't even the slightest bit of wind and waves. It was surprisingly smooth. In this vast sea, a small boat was particularly conspicuous. There were no signs of human habitation nearby, and there were no demon beasts at the bottom of the sea. Everything here seemed to be still. If it wasn't for their appearance that broke the peace, perhaps this place would continue to be like this. This should be the location marked on the map. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. As soon as these words came out, everyone's face revealed a trace of confusion. There's clearly nothing here. How could it be here? Chapter 6310. Indeed, it doesn't make sense, but this is the place marked on the map. Bailey Hongzhuang's sweet voice was filled with certainty. After carefully comparing the map, she gave a definite answer. Seeing this, everyone could not help but carefully observe the nearby situation. However, they really could not find anything special in such a vast sea. Could it be that too much time has passed so the inheritance has disappeared? When Xiren voiced his suspicions, no one knew how long this map had been drawn. Perhaps someone had already been here before them. Let's go down to the bottom of the sea to take a look, Di Beichen suddenly said. Hearing this, everyone was slightly stunned. They saw Di Beichen's figure flashed and directly jumped into the sea. As Di Beichen jumped into the sea, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked at each other. Without further delay, they quickly jumped into the sea. Usually, the sea water always had a faint fishy smell. However, the sea water here was different. It did not have any smell, just like pure water. After jumping into the sea, everyone did not see any difference and could only continue to swim deeper. However, as everyone swam down for a distance, The scene in front of them had completely shocked everyone. A huge tower sat at the bottom of the sea. It was so huge that it was like a castle. Even if it was just the top of the tower, the range was not ordinary, let alone the bottom. The entire pagoda was gray in color. Chains that were thicker than a person's body locked the entire pagoda, as if a sinner had been imprisoned here for a long time. It emitted a heavy and terrifying aura. No one thought that the real abyss of the Sea of Misery would look like this. The terrifying chains revealed an indescribable heaviness. This was a building that could not be described with words. It was spectacular beyond one's imagination. It was clearly located in the sea, but it was still brand new, as if it had not been eroded by the sea at all. Compared to it, the other two abysses were too far apart. Oh my God, there is such an existence in the world. Di Xiaofeng and the others were all shocked. They looked at such a magnificent and heavy building in disbelief. It was the same feeling that he had when he first saw the Brilliance Shrine and the Darkness Shrine. The difference was that it was a kind of worship and faith, while the one in front of him was a complete shock. Is this the real Sea of Bitterness? Bailey Hongzhuang muttered to herself. This kind of building had a kind of power that made one's heart palpitate. To think that such a shocking building would gradually be forgotten by the people of the upper realms. This shouldn't be the case. Di Xiaofeng couldn't help but sigh. He didn't know how this building was built, but its majestic grandeur was destined to be a shocking existence. It was a pity that such a place would gradually disappear from the sight of the world with the passage of time. The Bitter Sea Abyss is located at the bottom of the sea. Its name is really appropriate. Di Baichen said slowly. The abyss of the Sea of Bitterness was just like its name. It was located at the bottom of the sea. So this sea is called the Sea of Bitterness? Everyone was slightly startled. No one knew the name of this sea, but the Sea of Misery was really fitting. Chapter 63:11. Everyone looked at each other. They didn't understand the situation either. Usually this kind of situation would be an unpardonable evil. However, the Bitter Sea Abyss looked so quiet and solemn. It didn't seem to be related to evil. However, the chains wouldn't exist for no reason. There must be a reason for it to appear here. Could it be that their judgment was wrong? Just then Di Xiaofeng's voice suddenly sounded. I didn't expect the Bitter Sea Abyss to appear here. This voice was different from his usual voice. It was low and hoarse. Noticing this, everyone couldn't help but look over. They didn't understand what was going on. However, when they looked over, they found that Di Xiaofeng's eyes had turned red. Almost immediately, everyone realized that the one who spoke wasn't Di Xiaofeng, but the nine-tailed Inferno Fox. After a short moment of surprise, everyone wasn't too nervous. Di Xiaofeng and the nine-tailed Inferno Fox had already formed a contract. Therefore, the nine-tailed Inferno Fox wouldn't harm him. You know about the Bitter Sea Abyss? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. The nine-tailed Inferno Fox nodded. The Bitter Sea Abyss itself has a very strong power. It's a place that even cultivators from the immortal region want to reach. Actually, the three Abyss are filled with evil. The other two Abyss are filled with blood, power, violence, and even cruelty. To mainstream cultivators, the existence of the three Abyss isn't a good place. However, it's undeniable that if you want to increase your strength, this kind of environment will allow you to become stronger in the shortest time possible. At the same time, the number of cultivators who die in the abyss is even more terrifying. This is also the origin of the word abyss. Hearing the nine-tailed Inferno Fox's introduction, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others finally understood. Originally, they didn't pay much attention to the names of the three abyss. Although they felt that the names were very strange, they didn't know that there was so much meaning behind it. The Bitter Sea Abyss is different from the demonic abyss. It exists to test a person's heart. You've already experienced it before. Isn't it very scary? The nine-tailed Inferno Fox chuckled. There was a hint of mockery in her laughter. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others nodded. That kind of interrogation of one's heart was indeed very difficult, because it would make all problems unavoidable, making it impossible for you to avoid them. This is just a small part of it. In the past, the Bitter Sea Abyss was the same as the other two great abyss. Many cultivators came here to pass the test and obtain great power. However, this place is far more difficult than the other two abysses. Didn't you ask me why the Bitter Sea Abyss is locked with chains? The nine-tailed Inferno Fox asked. Everyone nodded in agreement. This was something that made them curious. That's because too many people have lost their lives here, or because there's an eternal demon in their hearts. The shackles of the heart were far more terrifying than the shackles of the body. The cultivators who failed in the other two abysses only needed to recuperate for a period of time to recover from their injuries. Even if it would delay some of his cultivation progress, it wouldn't have much of an impact. However, it was not easy for cultivators who failed in the Bitter Sea Abyss to escape unscathed. Chapter 63:12. Hearing the nine-tailed Inferno Fox's words, the scene gradually appeared in everyone's mind. Demons dancing wildly, that was probably the real demons dancing wildly. If most of the cultivators who came here turned into lunatics, then the scene would be extremely terrifying. It's because of this that the Bitter Sea Abyss was locked to the depths of the Bitter Sea by countless shackles. In the past, the Bitter Sea Abyss was located on an island and was much more conspicuous than the other two abysses. Everyone also understood, but in the face of such a situation, everyone's mood was very complicated. So, the reason why the Bitter Sea Abyss was lost was not because it was hard to find, but because someone did it on purpose. All the puzzles were solved at that moment. Compared to so many cultivators falling into madness, it was better to treat it as if it never existed. Although it cut off the possibility of training an expert, it also prevented a greater loss. The Bitter Sea Abyss's hurdle is so difficult, the reward after passing it must be very shocking, right? D. Bachin suddenly asked. When he said that, everyone's eyes lit up. No matter if it was the murderous aura or the blood aura, they were both extremely powerful existences. If it was an ordinary power, it would not be of much use as their strength increased. However, the effect of these two powers had always been there. Even if it was reduced slightly, the effect was still very huge. The difficulty of the Bitter Sea Abyss increased by so much. Its aura must be extremely powerful. That's right, the inheritance of the Bitter Sea Abyss is a very powerful existence. Nine-tailed Inferno Fox nodded slightly. Just like how its test is to face one's own heart and strengthen one's own beliefs, its inheritance is also a related existence. This power is not used on others but on the cultivator himself. That is to see through all falsehoods. Even Nine-tailed Inferno Fox could not help but reveal a yearning expression when talking about this power. See through all falsehoods? Bailey Hongzhuang was startled. Does it mean that the illusory realm has no effect in front of the cultivator who obtains the inheritance? Illusory realm is just one of the many falsehoods. As long as you obtain the inheritance, no matter what kind of illusory realm it is, it will not affect you at all. Not only that, any psychological test is meaningless to you. You can see through all falsehoods and you can even judge people more accurately. Everyone couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Although this didn't sound like a very strong power and wouldn't be of much help to one's combat strength, this kind of ability was often the most important to a cultivator. Seeing through all falsehoods. If they had such an ability, they would not have been suppressed by the Azure Demon earlier. In the face of some terrifying auras, they would not change their minds because of the other party's strength. This means that the aura of the strong will no longer be of any use to you. You will strengthen your strongest belief, and all illusions and aura suppression will no longer have any meaning. Actually, these are just means. The most important thing is that your heart will become unprecedentedly strong. The path of cultivation was long. In the early stages, one cultivated the body, and in the later stages, one cultivated the mind. As long as your hearts are unshakable, it is only a matter of time before you raise your cultivation. Chapter 63:13. Everyone fell into a state of shock. Even if they only heard about it, they couldn't help but feel their blood boiling. This kind of power was enough to make many cultivators go crazy. There's actually such a power in the world. Mo Yunjua's expression was complicated. Every experience would make them understand how insignificant they were. The inheritances of the three great abyss were very powerful, far beyond their imagination. They couldn't imagine where these powers came from, and who had such a terrifying power to imprison such a powerful Bitter Sea Abyss. There's one more thing that you might not know. What is it? If you obtain the power of the three great abyss, these powers will fuse together to become the strongest power. Nine-tailed Inferno Fox's lips curled up in an interested arc. This happened before, and only one person had truly done it. But it was really a long time ago. We only know that it was a graceful figure, and his strength was enough to make everyone gasp in shock. Since then, no one else had done it, and the news of the three great powers fusing also came from this person. Bailey Hongzhuang and D. Bachin looked at each other. They already had the blood aura field and the killing aura field, and vaguely felt that these two powers were similar. Now that they understood this point, they also believed that it was definitely true. So there's such a connection between the three great abyss. Xiren sighed, no wonder they're called the three great abyss. If Hong Zhuang and Beichen can also obtain the inheritance of the Bitter Sea Abyss, wouldn't that be amazing? Shangguan Yingying's eyes lit up. Among all of them, only Beichen and Hong Zhuang had obtained the inheritance of the two great abyss. The inheritance of the third great abyss was the most difficult, and it would be very difficult to obtain the inheritance. If you can obtain it, it's naturally great. But before you try, you'd better think carefully. If you fail, you might not be able to bear the consequences. Nine-tailed Inferno Fox's gaze fell on Di Beichen. Don't forget your promise, you still have to follow me to another place. Hearing this, Di Beichen nodded. Don't worry, I'll always remember this. So, it's best if you don't go in. If you go crazy, then everything I've done will be meaningless. Looking at the serious look on the nine-tailed Inferno Fox's face, everyone finally understood the reason why he introduced so many things. In fact, after understanding all of this, everyone's hearts were beating like drums. If they didn't know, they would have definitely entered directly. However, now that they understood so much, once they entered, they might also become people who lost their minds and ultimately die in the sea of misery. Why don't we give up? Bailey Union's face revealed a trace of fear. Originally, she didn't think of anything, but now that she understood, she felt that this place was not just a little scary. If they gave up, they might lose something. But if they entered, they might lose everything. Di Xiaofeng had already returned to his original appearance. Although the nine-tailed Inferno Fox was using his body to speak, he still understood everything clearly. Sure. Di Xiaofeng gestured for Bailey Yunyan to keep quiet, and Bailey Yunyan immediately stopped talking. In such a situation, everyone needed some time to think. Chapter 63:14. Compared to the bloodiness and cruelty of the other two abysses, she felt that the original intention of the Sea of Misery's existence was not to drive countless cultivators into madness, but only to strengthen the cultivators' beliefs. However, the cultivators' hearts were far from being as strong as the Sea of Misery thought, which was why there were so many problems. Previously, when she passed a test on the coast, she felt that she had gained quite a lot. After entering, she might be able to hone her willpower and face her heart. However, if she could not bear it, it would be extremely painful. When their hearts were unable to bear such pain, they might lose their lives. Silence. A long silence. Everyone just stood there quietly and looked at the majestic pagoda in front of them. They were struggling in their hearts. They had spent so much effort to come here and found the long-lost Sea of Misery. If they just stood in front of the door, they would be too unwilling. However, going in required too much courage. At this moment, a distant and ancient voice echoed from the Sea of Misery. Unlike when they were on the coast, they did not know where the voice came from. Now they clearly knew that the voice came from the pagoda. It was a voice that they did not understand at all. It sounded like a chant, but the magical language was something that they had never come into contact with before. It carried a special power. Hearing the magical voice, everyone felt their hearts tremble and their bodies were baptized. Unconsciously, everyone sat down at the entrance of the Sea of Misery. They closed their eyes and emptied their minds, quietly listening to the mysterious voice. All of their distracting thoughts had disappeared at this moment, leaving only nothingness and purity. They sat there for a long time and no one knew how long they had been sitting there. When Bailey Hongzhuang woke up, she felt that her body was a little stiff, as if she had been in the same position for a long time. The door of the Sea of Misery had been opened unknowingly. Looking at the heavy door, she only felt a strong attraction inviting her in. Her footsteps unconsciously pulsed, and she slowly walked through the door. Walking into the first floor, Bailey Hongzhuang found that the layout was very different from what she had imagined, but it also seemed like it should be like this. The simplicity of this place was vividly displayed. There was no dazzling brilliance or dazzling brilliance. Everything here seemed to have returned to its origin, bringing with it a simple and unadorned power. Simple wooden chairs and simple and casual furnishings. However, it was precisely these things that they would not have taken a fancy to on a normal day that appeared grand and simple here. At a glance, the main hall was empty except for some decorations. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes turned to the stairs in front of her. It was said that the Bitter Sea Abyss was not like the other two abyss that had a special place to break through. The Bitter Sea Abyss only existed for one purpose, and that was to break through. As long as he could reach the top of the tower, it meant that he had successfully passed the trial. However, after so many years, other than one person, no one else had been able to reach the top of the tower. Bailey Hongzhuang thought about what kind of test there would be on this floor, but found that nothing happened, so she walked directly in the direction of the stairs. Chapter 63:15. Could it be that because the bitter sea abyss has disappeared for so many years, even this level has become different? Bailey Hongzhuang was a little puzzled. She thought that the first level would be very difficult, but she did not expect to go directly to the second floor. However, Bailey Hongzhuang soon understood that things were not as she thought. It was just that the first floor did not have an assessment. As soon as she walked to the second floor, Bailey Hongzhuang found that the scene in front of her changed. Familiar and ferocious faces appeared in front of her. Bailey Yuyin, Xinyuan Heng, all of her former opponents had appeared in front of her. These people had been the stumbling blocks on her path, and now they had all appeared. They all look down on you and want to kill you. Now that you have become stronger, you should kill all of them. These bitches, they think of ways to bully you and humiliate you. You should kill all of them. In a world where the strong are respected, these people are just cheap lives. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the ferocious faces in front of her. In addition to some familiar faces, there were also some unfamiliar faces. Vaguely, she also remembered the faces of these people. Whether it was in Fengbo country, Tiangang sect, or even Penglai palace, these people had mocked her and concluded that she would die miserably. A lot of messy rumors were spread by these people. If it weren't for these guys, she wouldn't have been criticized all the time. Bailey Hongzhuang, go to hell. Xiao Sou stabbed directly at Bailey Hongzhuang. Her ferocious and terrifying appearance showed that she wanted to kill her. You stole my man and destroyed my family. I must kill you today. Bailey Hongzhuang held the sharp sword in her hand and moved directly to meet her. There should be an end between them. Ding ding ding. Their figures moved and the two directly confronted each other. Bailey Hongzhuang's figure was as fast as lightning. Her sword rose and fell without mercy. Chi. The long sword pierced Xiao Sou's chest, producing a dull sound. After Xiao Sou's death, Han Xiling appeared in front of her again. Beichen will always be mine. You don't deserve to be with him. If I kill you, Beichen will be with me forever. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. She didn't want to say anything more to this woman. All this time she had already given in quite a bit, but Han Xiling had always been pushing her bottom line. Since it was destined that only one of them could survive, then she could only take action. One by one her enemies fell in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Fresh blood splattered onto her fair face. There was a faint smell of blood, but it stimulated her heart. Kill them all. Kill them all. This thought screamed madly in her heart. Every single one of them deserves to die. Unknowingly, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes had turned red with bloodlust. The sharp sword in her hand continued to wave as she faced the disgusting faces. It was as if she would only be able to truly calm down after killing everyone. However, in the process of killing, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but recall her time in the magic tower. She had experienced a similar scene. She had never been a kind person and would never use the word kind to describe herself. Because in this world where the strong preyed on the weak, kindness was a luxury. Chapter 63:16. She saved people and also killed people. She would never be merciful to those who crossed her bottom line or her true enemies. However, how many people in this world would find her an eyesore? Because she had become stronger, because she had obtained better cultivation resources, there were bound to be many people who would gossip and secretly curse her. She had never taken these people to heart. This was because this was the most common phenomenon. No matter who it was, this kind of situation would happen. Facing these people, she could directly ignore them and act as if she had never seen them. If she had to kill everyone who had opinions about her, wouldn't she be exhausted to death? She was not a dictator and did not mind others having opinions about her. As long as they did not cross her bottom line and did not touch her reverse scale, she could act as if she had never seen them. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang stopped her sword. Looking at the blood dripping from the tip of the sword, the rationality that she had lost gradually came back. In the next moment, she realized that the ferocious faces in front of her had disappeared and the empty second floor of the demonic training tower had returned. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang realized that her emotions had unknowingly been infected and she had forgotten where she was. The power of the abyss of misery is really terrifying. Bailey Hongzhuang murmured. She had always thought that she had to stay calm, and no matter what the situation was, she should not be infected by the power here. However, from the moment she walked in, her emotions had been infected. Now that she thought about it, all of this was clearly a very fake scene. Those people who had already died would not appear in front of her, but she could not see through all of this. Under the influence of the strange power of the abyss of misery, all of the impossible situations would become reality in one's mind. It was a reality that one could not question at all. For a moment, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that her emotions had been completely infected and she only wanted to kill everything. If she had to kill everyone who was dissatisfied with her, how tiring would it be for her to live her life? What's more, envy, jealousy, and hatred were emotions that humans were born with and could never be eliminated. If he had to kill everything just because of this, he would be reduced to a killing machine. I finally understand why so many people lose their rationality in such a situation. Once they can't get out of it, they will forever be trapped in such emotions. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed inwardly. Fortunately, her rationality finally pulled her back to reality. Looking at the staircase that led to the third floor, she did not immediately go up. Although everything that had happened just now was only in her mind, she felt exceptionally exhausted. She did not know when, but her back was already drenched in sweat. I think I should rest here for a while before continuing. Bailey Hongzhuang was afraid. The second level was already very scary. The remaining levels would be even scarier. If she wasn't in a good state, the chances of her failing would be even higher. She couldn't let that happen. While Bailey Hongzhuang was trying to break through, Di Beichen was also trying to break through. However, even if the two of them were in the same place, they could not see each other at all. Chapter 63:17. Bailey Hongzhuang had rested on the second level for 2 whole days. The feeling of experiencing everything was difficult to describe with words. Only she knew how difficult it was. She needed to completely digest all these emotions before she could return to her best state of mind. Digesting these emotions would require her to think carefully about every detail and the reason why her emotions had collapsed. However, this problem itself was very difficult to understand. When faced with enemies, killing them without hesitation had always been her principle. If one does not remove the roots when cutting the weeds, they would grow again when the spring breeze blows. Once those fellows were at death's door, they would definitely find ways to deal with them in some dark corner. It was very likely that they would cause them great losses. Hence, she did not think that there was anything wrong with being ruthless towards these people. However, she could not kill everyone because of this. Everyone would have their own way of measuring the scale of this. Xiaohei noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang had not made it to the third level for a long time and understood how terrifying this trial was. Actually, when its master was undergoing the trial, it had not been able to see anything at all. It also did not know what kind of situation its master was in. After resting for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes filled with determination. Since she was already here, she must make use of this opportunity to train herself properly. If she could really succeed in breaking through this trial, she would welcome a new lease of life. However, even if she failed, as long as she could escape unscathed, it would be a great help to her. Then Bailey Hongzhuang made her way to the third level of the pagoda. The scene before her eyes became familiar and her memories were traced back to the past. Hongzhuang, that bunch of old fogies kept saying that the name grandfather had given you isn't good. That's because they have no taste at all. The old man, who was over 60 years old, sat in front of Bailey Hongzhuang as he fumed with rage. His face was filled with dissatisfaction and resentment. Grandfather, actually, this name itself is quite strange. Bailey Hongzhuang probed. How is it strange? The old man's face stiffened. Isn't this name easy to pronounce? You have no idea how happy your grandmother was when she had given you this name. What does this have to do with grandma? Back then when I married your grandmother it was surely Hongzhuang. However, your grandmother was proud and arrogant. She felt that it couldn't be done. She had to be Bailey Hongzhuang. However, I still married her back then. In the years that followed, sometimes she would talk about it until our family finally gave birth to you, a little girl. I gave you the name Bailey Hongzhuang. From then on, your grandma never talked about it again. She likes you the most. A kind smile appeared on Bailey Jingyu's face. I think this name sounds good. It suits my precious granddaughter the best. Grandpa, I like this name too. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Unconsciously, Bailey Hongzhuang had a bright and warm smile on her face. That was her carefree time. However, before she could be happy for long, the situation before her eyes suddenly changed. Hongzhuang, we've put so much effort into cultivating you, but you've failed to live up to our expectations and caused the entire family to decline. It's because you disappeared with the inheritance that we couldn't defeat the other families. Do you know how many cultivators from the family have fallen because of you? Chapter 63:18. The questions were like sharp blades that pierced Bailey Hongzhuang's heart. It was dripping with blood and the pain was unbearable. It's not like that. All explanation seemed feeble and powerless under such circumstances. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was deathly pale, and the guilt in her heart all this time had completely exploded. The Bailey family had declined for so many years. Even if she had tried her best to make the current Bailey family stronger over the years, too many people had been hurt because of her mistakes. When she had fallen, the situation in the family must have been very chaotic at that time. Perhaps no one could understand why she had done this. With her strength, as long as she had cultivated well in the family, her future would definitely not be bad. However, it was precisely because she had arrogantly wanted to go out and make a name for herself that she had lost her little life in the end. Why won't you listen to us obediently? Hongzhuang, you've really disappointed grandfather. Looking at the disappointed Bailey Hongzhuang in front of her, tears welled up in her eyes. Grandfather, I'm sorry. Bailey Jianghu turned around indifferently, and his majestic voice was filled with iciness. What's the use of saying these words now? What I regret the most is handing over the position of the family head to you. The sky seemed to have fallen into darkness at this moment. Endless darkness enveloped Bailey Hongzhuang, and an unspeakable pain pierced her heart. She had always known that this was her fault, and that her family would never forgive her. Master, wake up. Xiao He looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's pained and desperate appearance, and its face was full of worry. It had been with its master for so long, but this was the first time it had seen its master reveal such a desperate expression. Even it could empathize with this kind of bone-deep pain. What kind of test was this to cause its master to fall into such emotions? Master. However, no matter how Xiao He tried to wake Bailey Hongzhuang up, it was of no use. Xiao He stared at Bailey Hongzhuang in a daze, and its heart sank into sorrow. Its master should not be like this. She was usually smiling like a flower and she should be like this. This kind of test was too cruel for anyone. Some were quite cool. As long as you didn't think about it, you wouldn't feel pain. However, in this abyss of the sea of bitterness, it forced you to face the pain. It even tore open the scabs and looked directly at the bloody wounds. Bailey Hongzhuang fell into a long period of grief. She wanted to disappear from this world just like that. She didn't want to think or do anything. Perhaps she could be completely liberated. Outside the abyss of the sea of bitterness, Shangguan Yingying looked at Xiren beside her and said, Xiren, don't you intend to go in and try your luck? When Xiren shook his head slightly. Although the reward is very tempting, the success rate is too low. He had already experienced it once before. Although he felt that his heart had become clearer, when he thought about it carefully, the whole process was still very frightening. I don't have the confidence to break through these stages, so I might as well not go in. He was very clear about his situation. If he could withdraw from this stage even if he failed, then so be it. It was just like how he had failed in the demonic tower. He would definitely give it a try. However, facing the abyss of the sea of bitterness, he could not try. This was because he knew very well that his chances of success were too small. Chapter 63:19. Hearing Xiren's words, Shangguan Yingying nodded slightly. I also feel that this test is too terrifying. I definitely won't succeed. Actually, most people won't succeed. Choosing to give up at this time isn't a shameful decision. Di Xiaofeng's face was calm. In fact, after the nine-tailed inferno fox introduced the situation here, he already had the intention to retreat. It wasn't because he didn't dare to try. If there was a 30% chance of success, he would be willing to try. However, reality was cruel. Not to mention 30%, there wasn't even 10%. To him, this wasn't a wise move. So even if there was a trace of unwillingness in his heart, he didn't walk through the door. Bailey Yunyan also let out a sigh of relief after seeing that Di Xiaofeng didn't go in. She was most worried that Di Xiaofeng would go in. The situation introduced by the nine-tailed inferno fox was too terrifying. If there were any problems, she wouldn't be able to accept it. But Hongzhuang and Beichen both went in. Bailey Yunyan revealed a worried expression. In fact, she hoped that everyone would leave here. Since the bitter sea abyss was imprisoned here, there must be a reason. In such a dangerous place, disappearing might not be a bad thing. This is also expected. Di Xiaofeng sighed. Long ago he felt that Hongzhuang and Beichen would go in. He wanted to say a few words to persuade them, but in the end he didn't say it. Because Hongzhuang and Beichen were different from them. They had already obtained the inheritance of the previous two abyss, so the bitter sea abyss was more attractive to them. Most importantly, in the previous test, Hongzhuang and Beichen were the first to wake up. Their chances of success were much higher than theirs. I hope they can succeed. Mo Yunjue looked deeply at the spectacular abyss of the bitter sea in front of him. He didn't know which level they had reached. Yunjue, you don't plan to try? Shengguan Yingying wasn't surprised that the others didn't choose to try it. However, she was surprised when she noticed that Mo Yunjue didn't try it either. In her heart, Mo Yunjue had always been as outstanding as Beichen and Hong Zhuang. It was just like when Yunju had successfully passed through the demonic abyss. Hearing this, Mo Yunjue shook his head. With a complicated look in his eyes, he said, if it were anything else, I would give it a try. But this psychological test is not suitable for me. His life in the past was too dark. In the abyss of the sea of bitterness, everything was magnified. Normally, it was already difficult for him to stop himself from thinking about those things. If he hadn't come to the upper realm with everyone else, his situation might have been even worse. In the past, he had wanted to destroy himself and everyone around him more than once. That kind of feeling did not feel good, and he did not want to experience it again. Most importantly, he felt that once he went in, he would not be able to come out again. Everyone nodded. Yunju's life in the past was not easy. The shackles in his heart were more serious than any of them. Yunju, even if you don't enter the bitter sea abyss, your future achievements will definitely surpass others, Di Xiaofeng suddenly said. This was what he had always felt. Even if Yunju rarely spoke, he had the characteristics of a powerhouse. Chapter 63:20. Following Di Xiaofeng's words, Xiren and the others all nodded. There was more than one path to cultivation. Sometimes with shackles in the heart, one steps forward would be firmer. Mo Yunjue's gaze swept across everyone's faces and then revealed a faint smile. You don't have to comfort me. I won't be disappointed because of this. He was very clear about his situation. He wouldn't take the risk to try something that was destined to fail. Looking at Mo Yunjue's indifferent and calm appearance, everyone was slightly startled and then revealed a smile. In fact, in their hearts, this wasn't comfort at all. It was their heartfelt words. The cold darkness enveloped Bailey Hongzhuang. The whole world was strangely cold, without the slightest warmth, as if it was gradually freezing her. At this moment, a struggling thought appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang's mind. Scenes from when she was young appeared in her mind. Hongzhuang, it's good to study hard but don't work too hard. Bailey Hongzhuang lovingly stroked Bailey Hongzhuang's head. Grandpa only wants you to live happily. Grandpa, is it okay if I don't study well? It's okay. Bailey Jingyu smiled. You are Grandpa's precious granddaughter. No matter what you do in the future, even if it's wrong, you have to believe that Grandpa will never blame you or be angry with Hongzhuang. That warm smile was an eternal memory in her heart. Although the old man had a childish side, he was warm and tolerant most of the time. She remembered the many days when her grandfather taught her how to grow up. He was so tolerant and warm. Even if she really did something wrong, he wouldn't blame her. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes suddenly brightened. Her family would be sad and upset, but the people who loved her would only be sad because of her death. She was wrong. She was indeed wrong. Facing up to her mistakes and finding ways to make up for it was all she could do now. If she treated death as a release, then she would be doing nothing. She wouldn't even be able to make up for it. Kacha. The scene in front of her suddenly began to shatter. Kacha kacha. The sound of breaking continued to resound, and Bailey Hongzhuang found that she had returned to the third layer of the bitter sea abyss. After seeing this familiar yet strange environment, she sat down on the ground weakly. It was too terrifying. This stage was truly too terrifying. She was so close to not being able to walk out of it forever. If she hadn't thought of that idea at the last moment, she would have been gradually frozen by the ice, and her heart would never have been able to walk out. Master, are you all right? Xiao He rushed to Bailey Hongzhuang's side as soon as she saw Bailey Hongzhuang come out of the illusion. Her face was filled with worry. Previously, its heart had been hanging by a thread. It had a vague feeling that its master would never be able to walk out of it. Fortunately, Master still passed this stage in the end. Looking at the teary-eyed Xiao He, Bailey Hongzhuang rubbed its little head and hugged it again. Don't worry, it's all right now. Master, this stage is really too scary. It's only the third stage and it's already so difficult. I don't know what the next stages will be like. Chapter 63:21. They should take advantage of the fact that they were still able to escape unscathed. If this continued, they might have to stay here forever. Bailey Hongzhuang fell into silence. Every level was really terrifying. It was like endless self-abuse. This method was enough to break one's spirit. Even though she had successfully passed the level, her heart could not calm down for a long time. That indescribable sadness spread in her heart, making her feel at a loss. Xiaohei, I want to rest for a while. After a while, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Hearing this, Xiaohei quickly nodded. It did not dare to say anything else for fear of disturbing Bailey Hongzhuang. Slowly closing her eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang did not cultivate. She was too tired now. All her emotions filled her mind, making it impossible for her to calm down and think about anything. Therefore she only wanted to sleep quietly. Perhaps she would understand by then. Xiaohei quietly guarded by Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Through these 3 levels, it understood the power of the abyss of misery. Now it only hoped that its master could think through everything and leave this place. Their lives were already good. Even if they did not obtain the inheritance of the abyss of misery, it would not affect them much. At the same time, Di Beichen was also sitting on the 3rd level of the abyss of misery. Although there was also some palpitations on his face, it was obvious that his situation was much better than Bailey Hongzhuang's. Xiao Bai stayed by Di Beichen's side. Master, is this level really difficult? It's very difficult. Di Beichen nodded slightly. However, this level should be set according to a person's 7 emotions and 6 desires. The difficulty should not increase with each level. Instead, every cultivator has their own most difficult level. To me, this 3rd level is not as difficult as the 2nd level. I see. Xiao Bai immediately understood. I wonder what the 4th level will be. Di Beichen smiled faintly. No matter what it is, I have to give it a try. However, I have to rest for a while. Time passed slowly, but Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen, who were in the abyss of the Sea of Bitterness, could no longer tell the passage of time. After each challenge, they needed to spend a lot of time to sort out their emotions. Outside the abyss, Mo Yunjue and the others waited patiently. Beichen and the others have already been in there for a month. I wonder how they are doing now. Shengguan Ying looked at the tightly shut door of the Bitter Sea abyss with a distressed expression. They didn't dare to enter, so naturally, it was impossible for them to understand the situation of Bailey Hongzhuang. It was this feeling of not being able to understand at all and being anxious that made people feel particularly helpless. Their minds were always filled with worries about various situations that could occur at any time. For us right now, no news is probably the best news, Di Xiaofeng said slowly. In fact, as time passed, they became very anxious. However, other than waiting patiently, there was no other way to find out. If they fail, will they come out? Bailey Yunyan couldn't help but ask. Then as long as they don't come out, it means that they are still challenging the level? Di Xiaofeng nodded slightly and said with a serious expression. The 9-tailed Inferno Fox said that all the cultivators who failed the level would not be killed. However, it is very likely that they would come out unconscious. Chapter 63-22. Now that you mention it, I feel a lot more at ease. With Beichen's ability, even if they fail, it shouldn't be a problem for them to escape unscathed. Ziren let out a sigh of relief. Since they grew up together, he had long regarded Beichen as his own brother. His heart had always been in suspense, afraid that he would encounter any bad situation. However, he was very clear about Di Beichen's talent. Since someone could escape unscathed, then Beichen and the others shouldn't have any problems. Di Xiaofeng nodded slightly, his heavy heart quietly relaxing a bit. I also think they'll be fine. In a month's time, I think they've at least reached the 3rd level. Shengguan Ying smiled. They're all working hard to improve, so we can't fall behind. Let's take advantage of this time to cultivate. Otherwise, when Beichen and the others succeed, they'll definitely surpass us by far. That's true. Ziren nodded. Beichen and Hongzhuang's cultivation speed is really amazing. If we don't speed up, we won't even be able to keep up with them. Letting go of the nervousness and worry in their hearts, everyone began to cultivate in peace. Although they were in the deep sea with their current cultivation, there wouldn't be any problems even if they stayed here for a long time. Not only that, this sea of bitterness contained a special kind of pure energy. Perhaps it was a mysterious energy that could see through all illusions, allowing them to be able to concentrate when cultivating. This was a very strange feeling. Normally, they wouldn't even care about it when cultivating, but after truly feeling this difference, they found that in this environment, their cultivation speed was actually faster. Bailey Hongzhuang would rest for a long time after each breakthrough. During this time, her mood fluctuated the most. After transmigrating for such a long time, she had never faced so many problems. However, every time she digested these emotions she would find that she had improved quite a bit compared to before. This improvement also made her determined to continue to challenge the trial. She didn't know if her footsteps would stop here, but she had to try. After seeing her master's decision, Xiao Hei felt a little helpless, but she still supported her master's decision. All along, the reason why her master was able to stand out from so many people was mainly because of her personality and temperament. The 4th level. The 5th level. The 6th level. Every time she climbed a level, Bailey Hongzhuang felt like she had passed a disaster. She couldn't differentiate between the real environment one by one. Even in the most illogical situation, because of her own mind, everything became real. There are only 3 levels left. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the stairs in front of her. This period of time was extremely long for her, but she had finally passed the 6th level. Her heart had gone through many trials and was no longer the same as before. However, she also felt exceptionally tired, not physically tired but mentally tired. "Master, I believe you can do it." Little Black waved its 2 little arms and said with a smile. Then Bailey Hongzhuang bravely walked the 7th level. Chapter 63-23. Time flew by like a white steed flitting by a crack. Everything around the bitter sea abyss seemed to be still. Even the seawater did not have any waves. When Xiren and the rest would look at the black and white library every once in a while. However, there was no movement after such a long time. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. It has already been an entire year and they still haven't come out. Isn't this too long? Shangguan Yingying had a worried expression. Originally she felt that no news was the best news. However, after waiting for so long there was no news at all. Their hearts started to pound. It has indeed been too long. Xiren's gaze was deep. It had been so long that he started to wonder if Beichen and Bai Yunfei had really entered the bitter sea abyss. I'd better go in and take a look. Mo Yunjue looked at the entrance to the bitter sea abyss. His handsome face was filled with determination. He knew that his mental state was insufficient. It would be very dangerous if he entered. However, after entering he would at least know what situation Hongzhuang and the rest were in. Even if it was dangerous, it would be better than staying here and worrying. Yunjue, that won't do. Xiren quickly objected. If you want to go, I might as well go. Although he did not have much confidence, his situation should be better than Yunjue's. Just then the 9-tailed Inferno Fox's voice rang out. It's useless for you to be anxious. This is normal. Once you enter the bitter sea abyss, you will abandon all distracting thoughts. You will forget all your friends, family and lovers. The only thing left will be the thought of passing and giving up. Not only that, everyone will only see themselves after entering. Even if they are in the same place they will not be able to see anyone else. Thus, even if you enter you will not gain anything. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's expressions changed. Thick astonishment appeared on their faces. The situation after entering is actually so strange? Bailey Yunyan said in disbelief. The bitter sea abyss tests the cultivator. All external influences will be eliminated. However, contracted beasts might know a thing or two, the 9-tailed Inferno Fox said after thinking. Hearing that, Bai Li Yanche and Ling Er's expressions became complicated. If they had known earlier they would have gone in with Hongzhuang. That way they wouldn't have to be so anxious. Then they won't be able to come out for 3 to 5 years, right? Shangguan Yingying was secretly speechless. If it took such a long time it would be a little terrifying. Di Xiaofeng smiled and said, for cultivators it's not strange for them to train for 3 to 5 years. The vast majority of cultivators usually take this long when they go out for training. In fact, it should be because your training speed is usually very fast so you forget the time that others take. That's true. Chapter 63-24. Di Xiaofeng understood a little. This bitter sea abyss was so different, it would take a long time to pass. A year's time was actually not that long. It seems that we have no other choice but to continue waiting. Ling Er had a complicated expression. As a contract beast she had some telepathy. She had felt the pain that went deep into her bones just like the pain when she thought of Bai Yunjiao. She knew that Hongzhuang must have experienced a lot of pain. It was just that these emotions disappeared later on. The only thing she could feel now was that Hongzhuang was still alive. Other than that she did not know anything else. If it was somewhere else it would be enough to know that she was still alive. However, in such a place knowing this was obviously not enough. Time passed, and all the confusion in the world lingered in Bailey Hongzhuang's mind. She sat quietly in the 9th level of the Bitter Sea Abyss. Her expression was calm with her eyes closed, like an old monk in meditation. There was no emotional fluctuation on her calm face. Time, space, everything had already dissipated in her heart. She was her but also seemed not to be her. The world changed, everything changed, and whether it moved or not, it was all in her heart. She saw through it but did not say it out loud. There were all kinds of things in the world and she could transcend everything in the mortal world. Her heart was unprecedentedly calm. After experiencing all kinds of disasters, looking back at the shackles in her heart, she would find that she was unwilling to let go from the beginning to the end. Suddenly, a golden light burst out, and the top of the Bitter Sea Abyss bloomed with a strong light, illuminating the entire sea area. When Xiren and the others who were cultivating felt as if they were shrouded by a mysterious force, they immediately opened their eyes. After seeing the dazzling golden light at the top of the tower, everyone's face showed a happy smile. I knew they would succeed. Shengguan Ying's face showed ecstasy. After so many days of nervousness, her heart finally calmed down. This kind of hurdle that is as difficult as ascending to the heavens in the eyes of others seems to be easily broken through by them. I can be considered to have seen through it. When Xiren sighed. He was clearly shaking his head, but the curve of his lips couldn't help but rise. Shengguan Ying glanced at Xiren and said, "Come on, aren't you always so nervous that you don't know what to do?" Di Xiaofeng and the others softly chuckled. Looking at the golden light, they exclaimed, "I didn't think that someone would actually succeed." The 9-tailed inferno fox had a rueful look on its face. The reason why it had stopped Di Baichen earlier was because it really didn't think well of them. The danger was too great. The slightest carelessness could turn one into a cripple. Who would have thought that it would witness something that no one had succeeded in so many years? But I wonder who succeeded in passing the trial? Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. Baichen and Hong Zhuang went in together. Now that one of them had succeeded, they could only relax by half. Since they succeeded, I think they should be coming down soon. Let's wait patiently. Mo Yunjue slowly said, his dark eyes carrying a trace of expectation. Both of them are so outstanding. Since one of them succeeded, it should only be a matter of time before the other succeeds. Chapter 63-25. I think this might be fate. Baichen and Hong Zhuang are both people who have obtained 2 great inheritances of the Abyss. They also coincidentally gathered 4 pieces of the map and came to the Bitter Sea Abyss. Now, one of them has obtained the inheritance of the Bitter Sea Abyss. That means they can fuse the 3 great inheritances together. Just thinking about it makes me look forward to it. Bailey Yunyan's eyes shone brightly. Even if all this had nothing to do with her, she couldn't help but feel happy for Baichen and Hong Zhuang. Di Xiaofeng patted Bailey Yunyan's head. When they come out, you'll know what kind of changes will happen after the 3 great powers fuse. After Bailey Hong Zhuang succeeded in passing the level, she felt that everything had suddenly become clear. Looking at the splendid surroundings, a faint smile appeared on her face. If one looked closely, they would find that her eyes had become deeper and calmer than before, revealing a hidden sharpness. Her face obviously didn't change, but it had a trace of tranquility and detachment from worldly affairs. Congratulations, you've passed the level. Reward, see through all falsehoods, heaven's eye. The ancient voice sounded again, but it didn't have the same distant feeling as before. Instead, it became incomparably clear, as if an old man was standing beside her. A bright golden light wrapped Bailey Hong Zhuang. Then, Bailey Hong Zhuang felt a sharp pain between her eyebrows, as if something had broken out from between her eyebrows. Blood dripped from between her eyebrows, but she couldn't move. However, this warm golden light was filled with a mysterious power. This power flowed through her body as if her body had been baptized. The tiredness from these days disappeared with this power. Her body felt relaxed, and she also felt that her cultivation was gradually increasing. When the golden light disappeared, everything returned to its original state as if nothing had happened. However, Bailey Hong Zhuang was keenly aware that there was an extra thing between her eyebrows. With a thought, an eye appeared between her eyebrows. Through this eye, she could see much more clearly than the naked eye, and the range of her vision was completely beyond imagination. However, there was nothing to see at the moment, so she put it away. With a thought, the third eye disappeared, and the skin between her eyebrows returned to its usual appearance. There were no visible changes at all. So this is the heaven's eye. Bailey Hong Zhuang sighed in her heart. Even though she couldn't use it for the time being, she had already felt that the heaven's eye was extraordinary. None of the inheritances of the three great abyss were simple, and the inheritance of the bitter sea abyss was even more impressive. Just as she was deep in thought, she suddenly realized that the bloody aura and killing aura had changed. A powerful and terrifying power had wrapped around her. The bloody aura and killing aura clashed, turning the surroundings into a battlefield. A shocking aura swept through the battlefield, filled with ruthlessness and cruelty. The bloody scene was terrifying. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. Normally, the energy of the blood chi field and the killing chi field had always been very shocking. However, this was the first time that such a situation had occurred. It was really unexpected. Chapter 63-26. The three types of power engulfed Bailey Hongzhuang and swept up into a terrifying storm. She was in the center of the storm. At that moment, Bailey Hongzhuang felt as if she was in the center of a whirlpool. Her body was completely out of her control and she felt as if she was about to be torn to pieces. "Master, are you all right?" Xiaohei looked nervously at Bailey Hongzhuang. Such a terrifying power was truly shocking. Even though it was outside the storm, it felt that this power was exceptionally terrifying, not to mention Bailey Hongzhuang who was in the center of the storm. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had no time to answer Xiaohei's question. She could only focus all her energy on dealing with these three types of power. Otherwise, once she was torn to pieces by this storm, she would probably cease to exist. Bailey Hongzhuang furrowed her brows. Her fair and delicate face was now a little pale. She gritted her teeth and held on bitterly. Every second was torture. As time slowly passed, Bailey Hongzhuang's third type of power gradually emitted a simple and peaceful aura. It was this aura that began to neutralize the evil aura of the other two types of power. Even though it was only a slight change, Bailey Hongzhuang could sense that her situation had taken a turn for the better. As the peaceful power gradually increased, the pain she had to endure also began to lessen. She faintly began to realize that perhaps this process was the process of the three great abyss inheritance merging. Because these three types of power were the powers of the three great abyss. However, the nine-tailed inferno fox had never mentioned that the merging process would be so painful. However, she was also beginning to look forward to what kind of surprise the merging of the three types of power would bring her. Xiaohei was originally looking nervously at Bailey Hongzhuang who was in the center of the storm. It was only when it saw that the storm had gradually calmed down that it felt a little more at ease. In this abyss of the sea of misery, there were strange things everywhere. Even though its master had succeeded in breaking through, it did not expect such a thing to happen. It was really worried about what would happen next. Fortunately, what Xiaohei was worried about did not happen again. As the three powers gradually subsided, the golden light also completely disappeared. A smile appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's face. She had passed through so many stages in fear and trepidation. Now she had finally completed it. "Master, is it over?" Xiaohei asked. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "We've been here for a long time. Let's get out quickly. I'm sure everyone is worried about us." Ever since she entered the sea of misery, she could only sense the passage of time, but she was unable to discern how much time had passed. After going through the final trial of time, she felt as if she had walked through an entire lifetime. She felt as if she had spent an endless amount of time in the abyss of bitterness. In fact, she was a little scared now. If she had really stayed in the bitter sea abyss for a few decades, would everyone still be outside? "I can finally leave this place." Xiaohei heaved a sigh of relief, a look of relief on its face. "Staying in this place all day long has almost suffocated me to death. The only good thing is that my cultivation has increased. If it was on a normal day it could play around or look for delicious food. Its cultivation would not increase as quickly as it did now. After all, in this abyss of bitterness, it could not find anything else to do other than cultivate." Chapter 63-27. My cultivation base has increased by 2 levels. Xiaohei replied honestly. Then I can rest assured. Bailey Hongzhuang heaved a sigh of relief, her entire being feeling much lighter. Master, what do you mean by that? Xiaohei was a little confused. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Originally, I was worried that we would stay here for too long, but according to your cultivation progress, you've improved by 2 levels. At least, it means that we haven't stayed here for too long. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xiaohei immediately understood and chuckled. That's right, that's right. I feel that my cultivation speed has been faster than usual. Their cultivation would only improve rapidly when they went out for training or when they encountered great opportunities. As for other times, if they only went into closed-door cultivation, it would take more than a year for them to increase by 2 levels. Although I have become very strong in this 1 year, for most cultivators, this is already considered a very fast speed. When Mo Yunjue and the others saw that the golden light at the top of the pagoda had disappeared, their eyes were filled with anticipation. If they had guessed correctly, this inheritance should have already ended. I wonder who will come out first? Shengguan Yingying's face was filled with anticipation. I think it could be Hong Zhuang. Her attainments in this area have always been astonishing. I think it should be Beichen. When Ziren pondered and said, I know Beichen quite well. To be honest, although he has had some unfortunate experiences in the past, these things did not have much of an impact on his heart. I think it won't be too difficult for him to pass the trial. As for Hong Zhuang, her situation in the past was even more difficult than Beichen's. Hearing Ziren's words, everyone immediately understood. Although Beichen had been assassinated by the Jun family when he was young and had been sent to the lower realm, sect leader Situ had always raised him as his own grandson. Although he had suffered some hardships during his training, this was something that every cultivator would experience. In comparison, Hong Zhuang had it much harder. In the past, she had always been bullied in Fengbo country and even had her engagement broken off. After that, she only wanted her parents to be in pain. This journey was really not easy. Shengguan Yingying was originally very insistent on her idea, but after hearing what Ziren said, she felt that it made sense. Even if Hong Zhuang's speed is slower than Beichen's, I believe that she will succeed. In her heart, Hong Zhuang was the most powerful person. I think so too. Ziren smiled. Creak. The door to the Bitter Sea Abyss was opened. Everyone's eyes fell on the door, looking forward to the person who would come out. However, when they saw the cultivator's appearance clearly, everyone's faces were filled with shock. It can't be. This? Am I seeing things? Ziren and the others were stunned. The situation in front of them was really beyond their expectations. When Bailey Hongzhuang walked to the door of the Bitter Sea Abyss, she recalled everything that had happened in the past. Actually, she was also curious. Did Beichen also go through the trial while she was going through the trial? With her understanding of Beichen's character, it was most likely so. However, even if she had already broken through, she still felt very scared when she thought about it. She did not know if Beichen could succeed. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.